I didn't start it, but I definitely finished it moment. What is it? I was 22 years old, fresh out of college, working downtown as a junior accountant at a mid-sized firm. Brendan, my supervisor, was one of those guys who peaked in high school, and he never got over it. He was 38 years old, still talking about his football glory days. Women were still treated by him as if we existed only for his convenience and entertainment. The way these things always do. It started small. Comments about my outfits, and how I should smile more since I looked too serious for such a pretty girl. Jokes were made about finding me a boyfriend, one who could teach me how to have fun and handle me. Initially, I ignored it, thinking it would stop if I just did good work and kept my head down. Right outside his glass office, my cubicle was positioned, so escape was not an option. "Morning, Delilah," he'd say every day, leaning over my desk so his coffee breath would hit my face. "That's a tight little dress. Are you trying to impress someone special today?" A smile I would force and turn back to my computer, but he'd linger, either asking if I was wearing that new perfume just for him, or making comments about my legs. That tone men use when they think they're being charming, but actually sound predatory, was carried by his voice. "You'd be even prettier if you smiled more," he would say, and then laugh as though it was the most original observation ever made. Sympathetic looks were shot my way by the other women in the office, but they never said anything directly. Later, I understood the reason why. The real story was told by the whispered conversations I heard in the bathroom. Already, 3 women had been forced out after complaints were filed by them against Brendan. Systematically, their careers were destroyed, their references poisoned, and their reputations smeared across the industry. During one of our brief kitchen encounters, Patricia from payroll whispered, "Just keep your head down and don't give him any ammunition. He eventually gets bored if you don't react." Last year, Jennifer tried to fight back, and she now can't get hired anywhere in the city. With me, however, Brendan was not getting bored. My lack of response seemed to encourage him, if anything. Professional politeness was interpreted by him as me playing hard to get. The touching came then. With a hand on my shoulder that lingered too long during meetings, it started. Accidental bumps happened in the hallway, where his hand would graze my hip or chest. He'd find excuses to walk by my desk and look down my neckline when I wore dresses, sometimes even bending over while pointing at something on my computer screen, pressing his body against my back as he reached over to use my mouse. "Let me show you how to fix that spreadsheet error," he'd say. His hand sometimes accidentally brushing my breast as he moved. His breath would be hot on my neck. In a secret folder on my personal laptop, I started documenting everything. Times, dates, witnesses present, exact quotes when I could remember them. But completely powerless I felt. With Thomas, the HR director, Brendan was best friends. Every weekend they played golf together at the country club. Having gone to college with one and serving as best man at the other's wedding, he was also tight with 2 of the senior partners. Clear that Brendan was untouchable was made by the company culture. The biggest clients were brought in by him. He had connections throughout the industry and was being groomed for a partnership track. A recent graduate with student loans and no family connections, meanwhile, was who I was. Me, who would believe, who would even care? "Don't take it personally. That's just how Brendan is," Melissa from the front desk advised. "He doesn't mean anything by it, but she knew better. I could see that in her eyes. By staying invisible, she was just protecting herself." Over my first 6 months, things gradually escalated. For private consultations about my work, Brendan started calling me into his office. Lasting an hour or more, these sessions would occur during which he'd sit on the edge of his desk instead of behind it, positioning himself so I had to look up at him. My appearance would be complimented by him more than my actual work performance. "You're really blossoming here, Delilah," he'd say, his eyes scanning my body. "I can see you have a lot of potential. You could go far in this company with the right guidance and mentorship." Always clear was the implication. His mentorship meant the right mentorship. Going along with whatever he wanted meant going far. Me, he started inviting to lunch. Just the 2 of us. He'd frame it as a work requirement when I made excuses. "Part of your professional development," he'd explain. "How business is really conducted is what you need to learn. Over meals, that happens. Not in conference rooms." Wine he'd order and pressure me to drink during these lunches. "Live a little, come on. So buttoned up, you always are." He'd joke about how I was no fun and needed to loosen up if I wanted to succeed in business when I'd stick to water. His college days, his brief semi-professional football career, and his connections in the industry he would tell me about, with the underlying message always being that my success depended on staying in his good graces. Reaching across the table to touch my hand, he'd say, "I like you, Delilah. When I was starting out, you remind me of myself. Hungry, willing to do what it takes to get ahead." During our annual company retreat at the Riverside Resort, a sprawling complex 2 hours outside the city, the breaking point came. For team building and strategic planning, The entire firm spent 3 days there, though mostly it was an excuse for everyone else to drink by the pool and for the partners to play golf. By staying close to groups of other employees, I'd managed to avoid Brendan for most of the retreat. I found myself alone at the hotel bar, but on the final evening after the awards ceremony and company dinner, either gone to bed or continuing the party in someone's suite, most people were. Before the next morning's early checkout, catching up on emails was what I was doing. Sliding into the booth beside me before I could escape, Brendan appeared then. To block my exit, he positioned himself, trapping me against the wall. On his breath, I could smell the whiskey and the glassy look in his eyes, which meant he'd been drinking steadily since the dinner ended. I could see. His voice thick with alcohol, he said, "Well, well, look who's hiding out here all by herself, working even on vacation. Dedication, that is." Closing my laptop, I said, just finishing up some client emails. I should probably head to bed soon. Tomorrow I have an early flight. His hand landing on my arm to prevent me from standing, he said, "Hold on there, Speed Rare. Still young as the night. Talk, we should." "About what?" I asked, though where this was heading, I already knew. His hand moving to my thigh, he said, "About your future here. You know, Delilah, if you were more cooperative, more of a team player, you could advance a lot faster in this company." My leg was squeezed by his finger, and sick to my stomach I felt. Trying to keep my voice steady, I said, "I think I am a team player. Good have been my performance reviews." A sound with no humor in it, he laughed. "Performance reviews? That's cute. About client reports and spreadsheets you think this business is? Sweetheart, it's about relationships. Personal relationships." Higher on my thigh moved his hand, and away I tried to slide. Too narrow was the booth, and against my side he was pressed, using his body weight to keep me trapped. My heart starting to race, I said, "I think a misunderstanding has been had here." His face closer to mine now, he said, "No misunderstanding. For 6 months, I've been patient with you, giving you time to settle in, get comfortable. But waiting, I'm done. Tonight, you're going to come up to my room, or your career here is over." Simple as that it was. Against my cheek was his hot breath, and rising in my throat, I could feel panic. Really happening, this was. Months of escalation later, he was finally making his move. Something that changed everything, I noticed then. Screen facing up, his phone was sitting on the table. Open was a voice memo app, the red recording light blinking steadily. Nodding toward the phone, I asked, "What is that for?" Showing teeth stained by red wine and whiskey, he followed my gaze and grinned. "Insurance policy, sweetheart, in case you get any bright ideas about reporting this conversation later. Your word against mine, except I'll have proof that you were flirting, asking for it, leading me on." Closer he leaned, his lips almost touching my ear. "When I play them this recording of you agreeing to come to my room, do you think anyone is going to believe that sweet little Delilah was just an innocent victim?" In his drunken confidence, Brendan had made one crucial mistake. To notice that I'd already switched our phones earlier in the evening, he was too intoxicated. I'd seen him leave his phone on the table when he'd gone to the bathroom during dinner. I'd swapped it with mine on impulse. With the same black protective cases, our phones were identical models. Mine was the phone currently recording on the table, which I'd immediately set to airplane mode. Sitting in my purse was his actual phone, the one with all his contacts, files, and photos. Forcing my voice to sound thoughtful rather than terrified, I said, "You know what? Maybe you're right. On just the work side of things, perhaps I have been too focused." As he smiled with satisfaction, his grip on my thigh loosened slightly. "Now you're talking sense. Smarter than you let on. I knew you were." I let him talk and talk and talk for the next 25 minutes. His tongue had been completely loosened by the alcohol, and careless he was made by his arrogance. Exactly how the system worked at our firm and apparently several others in the city he detailed, which managers were involved in the network, how targets were selected by them, and what happened to women who tried to file complaints or refuse their advances. His hand still on my leg, he explained, "It's not just about sex, but bragging about his power was now his focus. About control it is. About knowing your place in the hierarchy. Thinking they're going to change the world with their ambition and their degrees. These young girls come in. How things really work is what someone has to teach them." Specific incidents with other women he described, including some who left the company under mysterious circumstances. He named names. About having compromising photos of Rebecca, a junior associate who'd been convinced to quit after refusing his advances. He bragged, apparently forgetting that he was supposedly recording this as evidence against me, he continued. "Thomas in HR is key to the whole operation. Any complaints that come in are buried by him. The paperwork he makes disappear, and by documenting their attitude problems and performance issues, he helps us build cases against troublemakers." Extending beyond our firm, he described a network involving managers at competing companies who shared information about women who'd filed harassment complaints, thereby blacklisting them from the entire industry effectively. With a laugh, he said, "The beauty of it is that most of the work is done by them themselves. They just quit because they get so frustrated and demoralized. Problem solved. Legal battles that are messy? None." When he started talking about specific partners in the firm who were aware of his behavior and either looked the other way or participated because of his client relationships, the most damaging part came. Referring to the managing partner, he said, "Harrison Webb knows exactly what's going on, but but $8 million a year in billings I bring in. What's he going to do? Because some secretary feels uncomfortable, fire his golden goose? His head lolling back against the leather seat, he finally passed out in the booth by the time this was over. The most incriminating audio I could have imagined, 25 minutes of it, I had. Just the beginning, though, that was. I connected his phone to my laptop back in my hotel room, and something that made my hands shake I discovered. For months, Brendan had been recording voice memos, not only with me but also with other women. Insurance against false accusations he thought he was creating, but documenting his own crimes in exhaustive detail was what he'd actually done. 47 different audio files were contained within the phone. Recordings of conversations with women he was harassing were some of them. Him talking to himself, planning his approaches, celebrating his successes, or complaining about women who'd gotten away were others. In graphic detail, what he'd done to Rebecca, the junior associate who'd quit, he described in one particularly vile recording. He talked about photos he'd taken of women without their consent during company events in another one. Phone calls with other managers, in which they coordinated their efforts to push out problem employees, had recordings. A folder of photos and videos was the most shocking discovery, however. Pictures taken up women's skirts during meetings, photos from the company Christmas party, where he photographed them in compromising positions after drugging women's drinks, of women changing clothes, thinking they had privacy. Videos recorded through the office windows existed. Downloading everything to multiple external drives and cloud storage accounts took me the entire night. I had copies of nearly 6 months of evidence by dawn, documenting a systematic pattern of sexual harassment, assault, drugging, and illegal surveillance that involved at least 15 women and half a dozen male managers across 4 different companies. With a plan, I walked into the office Monday morning. To HR first, but I did not go. The partners, I didn't go to. Straight to the local news station I went. Led by reporter Roxanne Torres, WZTN Channel 7 had an investigative unit, and she'd won awards for exposing corruption in local government and business. She agreed to meet me immediately when I called, and said I had evidence of a sexual harassment network involving multiple companies. After reviewing just the first few recordings, she said, "This is bigger than just workplace harassment. Organized criminal activity, this is. Taking photos without consent, drugging people, conspiracy to destroy careers. About felony charges, we are talking." I made copies of everything and started distributing them strategically while she began preparing her investigation. To the State Labor Board went one package, another went to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and to the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division went a third. Something that still makes me smile, I did then. An anonymous email account I created, and sent selected recordings to every employee in our company, plus employees at the 3 other firms that were mentioned in Brendan's conversations. An email with the subject line, "The truth about sexual harassment at your workplace," was received by all 347 people. A note I included. By the harassers themselves, the attached recordings were made. Evidence to use against their victims, they thought they were creating. Their own crimes, instead, they documented. You're not alone if you've been a victim, and proof you now have. To absolute chaos, I walked into work Tuesday morning. News vans filled the parking lot. Near the entrance, police cars were parked, walking around with briefcases and badges. People in suits who definitely weren't employees could be seen by me through the glass doors. With panic and fury, the atmosphere inside was electric, demanding they trace the email and find out who had leaked the recordings. Brendan was screaming at Thomas from HR. Huddled in the main conference room with lawyers were 3 women from accounting. Constantly, the phones were ringing with regulatory agencies, clients, and reporters demanding statements. Brendan was shouting, "This is corporate espionage. Confidential files were stolen by someone and illegally distributed. Made, I want arrests." FBI agent Sarah Mitchell approached him then. "Actually, Mr. Morrison, the ones you created yourself are the files we're interested in." As 2 federal agents escorted Brendan to a private office for questioning, I watched from my cubicle. In about 10 seconds, his face had gone from red with anger to gray with fear. Thomas from HR appeared at my desk, Delilah, his usual smug confidence now replaced by obvious panic. "Now, we need to talk." He tried to play good cop in his office. "Look, intense sometimes, I know Brendan can be. But internally, we handle these things. To everyone's careers, including yours, going to the media was unnecessary and damaging." Innocently, I asked, "What things?" "What you mean? I'm not sure." His eye twitched. "With me, don't play games. Somehow, I know you're behind this. Too convenient is the timing." "Behind what?" I continued. "Like any other day I came to work and full of FBI agents, I found the office. What he did to deserve federal attention, maybe you should ask Brendan." Agent Mitchell knocked on the door before Thomas could respond. "About your role in suppressing harassment complaints and destroying personnel files, Mr. Thomas. We need to speak with you." Returning to my desk where I pretended to work while watching the drama unfold around me, I excused myself. 4 more employees had been taken for questioning by lunchtime, including 2 senior managers whose names had appeared in Brendan's recordings. That evening during the 6 broadcast, the news story broke. To verify the recordings and gather additional testimony, Roxanne Torres had worked around the clock, spanning 6 companies in the metropolitan area. Her investigation revealed a network of sexual harassment involving over 30 women and at least 12 male managers. Torres reported, a systematic campaign of sexual harassment, assault, and career sabotage is documented by these recordings made by the perpetrators themselves. The largest workplace harassment conspiracy ever uncovered in this region, federal investigators say this may be. Interviews with 5 women who'd been targeted by the network were included in the story. Obscured were their faces, but devastating were their stories. Being drugged at a company party and waking up with photos of herself being circulated among male managers was described by one woman. After refusing sexual advances, another told of being forced out of her job, only to find that from other companies in the industry, she'd been blacklisted. The story had gone national by Thursday. The major networks picked it up then, after CNN did. As women across the country shared their own stories of workplace harassment, the hashtag recorded evidence started trending on social media. In 3 days, our firm's stock price dropped 60%. Canceling contracts began with major clients. A formal investigation into the entire industry's hiring and promotion practices was announced by the state attorney general. Into the managing partner's office, I was called Friday morning. To be fired, sued, or worse was what I expected. Harrison Webb, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 1 week, I found instead. Standing when I entered, he said, "Miss Delilah, an apology I owe you, a profound personal apology." He gestured for me to sit, then by taking the chair next to mine rather than staying behind his imposing desk, he surprised me. His voice heavy, he said, "The last 3 days, listening to those recordings I've spent, hearing my company described as a hunting ground, hearing about crimes committed during company time in our offices with our equipment, that this happened under my leadership, I'm ashamed. That the firm's board of directors had met in emergency session and voted unanimously to implement sweeping changes," he explained. Immediately, Brendan and Thomas were fired, along with 4 other managers. Going forward, all harassment complaints would be handled by an independent firm. Mandatory for all employees, starting with senior management, would be sensitivity training. Webb said, "Effective immediately, we're also promoting you to senior accountant, along with a 50% salary increase, and a position on our newly formed Ethics Oversight Committee. The harm that was done is not undone by it, and it's not enough, but a start it is." I asked the other women who were targeted, "What about them?" To offer restitution and public apologies, we're reaching out to every woman named in those recordings. To return to the company in elevated positions, several have agreed. Legal action, which we will not contest, others are pursuing. Webb's face darkened, and Brendan? Never again will Brendan Morrison work in this industry. With multiple felonies, including sexual assault, drugging, invasion of privacy, and racketeering, the FBI has charged him. In 6 months, his trial starts. During that trial, the real satisfaction came. Against Brendan and his network, 27 women testified. Before the charges were even filed, his wife had left him, taking their 2 children and moving back to her parents' house in another state. In foreclosure was his $800,000 suburban home. His country club membership had been revoked. His calls would not be taken by none of his former golf buddies. I stood up in the packed courtroom and looked directly at Brendan, who was seated at the defendant's table, looking like a broken man. When the prosecutor asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement, my voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom, I said, "Your Honor, I would never amount to anything in this industry," Mr. Morrison told me, that I should just smile, accept his behavior, and be grateful for whatever scraps of advancement he chose to give me. To think the business world operated on merit rather than personal relationships. I was naive, he said. From my jacket pocket, I pulled out a folded acceptance letter and paused. On a full academic scholarship, I've been accepted to law school. Victims' rights and employment law is what I'll be specializing in. About one thing, Mr. Morrison was right. Relationships are what this business is about. About what kind of relationships matter, but he was wrong. To the crowded courtroom filled with women who'd come to support the victims, I gestured. The relationships that matter are these: other women supporting women, survivors helping survivors. Standing up for what's right instead of what's profitable are the people. I realized he was crying as Brendan's shoulder shook. I continued. Mr. Morrison thought he was teaching me about power, something much more valuable. Instead, he taught me that predators always underestimate their victims, he taught me. Someone young, vulnerable, and inexperienced is seen by them, and powerless. They assume we are. The right moment to fight back is just what we're waiting for. The letter I folded and put back in my pocket. That justice doesn't always come from the system, he also taught me. Your own justice you sometimes have to create. To let your enemy defeat themselves is sometimes the best way to end a war. To 5 years in federal prison, the judge sentenced Brendan, and to pay $2.3 million in restitution to his victims, he ordered him For his role in the conspiracy, 3 years were received by Thomas. Sentences ranging from probation to 18 months were received by 6 other managers across the 4 companies. Roxanne Torres, who'd covered the entire trial, approached me as we left the courthouse. She said, "I'm writing a book about workplace harassment networks and how technology is changing the game. Writing the foreword, would you consider?" A bestseller became the book titled Recorded Evidence: How Predators' Own Words Brought Down a Harassment Network. With the line, "When they start believing their own lies about being untouchable is the most dangerous moment for any predator," my foreword opened. Law school. 3 years later, I graduated at the top of my class. To become my business partner, Roxanne had left journalism, and Torres and Associates, specializing in employment law and workplace harassment cases. We opened, using the perpetrator's own Slack messages and recorded Zoom calls as evidence. Our first major victory involved exposing a harassment network at a tech startup. As a model for how companies should respond to harassment scandals, the firm where I'd worked as a junior accountant was now held up. About the importance of believing victims and taking swift action against predators, Harrison Webb regularly spoke at conferences. Didn't just expose criminals. "The recordings Miss Delilah provided," he'd say in his presentations, "they saved our company's soul." An unexpected letter forwarded by the prison system was received by me during my law school graduation ceremony. Writing from federal prison, it was from Brendan. It read, "I hope you're satisfied. My entire life, my career, my marriage, everything I worked for, you destroyed all over a misunderstanding. Instead of setting traps and playing games, you could have just talked to me like an adult." One sentence I wrote him back: "Your own life you destroyed. Play, I just pressed." The 5-year anniversary of the scandal was marked last month. Offices in 3 cities are had by our law firm now, and 15 attorneys it employs. With a 94% success rate, over 200 harassment cases we've handled. We've seen real cultural change in how companies handle these issues. More importantly, senior positions at Fortune 500 companies are now held by 3 of Brendan's former victims. The CFO of a major nonprofit, Patricia from payroll, now is. A federal prosecutor specializing in white-collar crime, Rebecca, the junior associate who'd been forced out, became. At a conference where we were both speakers, Rebecca told me, "Our voices back you gave us, not just by exposing what happened, but by showing us that we realized more power than we had." On my phone, I still keep that original recording, though to use it again, I've never had to. Legal reasons are not why. Closed is the case long ago. As a reminder of something important, I keep it. On their victims staying silent, scared, and isolated, predators count. Someone young, inexperienced, and vulnerable is seen by them, and powerless, they assume we are. To silence anyone who threatens them, they think they can control the narrative, manipulate the evidence, and use their positions of authority. One crucial detail, but they always forget: their own arrogance is their biggest weakness. Building monuments to their own cleverness, documenting their conquests, or bragging about their power, they can't resist it. A war he thought he'd already won was started by Brendan. All the advantages were his: institutional support, connections, experience, and age. My career, my references, and my future in the industry were controlled by him. His own mouth was what he didn't control. Isn't getting even sometimes the best revenge? It's letting your enemy destroy themselves while every word is documented by you. Doesn't always come from the system, Justice. Yourself, you sometimes have to record it. And sometimes the most satisfying victory is when your oppressor realizes that the weapon you used to defeat them was handed to you by them. Teaching me my place in his world was what Brendan thought he was doing. Instead, to build a better world where predators like him have no place at all, he taught me. That war, I didn't start, but finish I definitely did.